Hi. All right. Hello, 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 everybody. It's so good to see everyone. As we get started here, I do want to let everyone know that we are live streaming today. So if you do not want your beautiful faces on YouTube, now is the time to turn off your video. Um, but welcome, everybody. It's good to see you, Susan and Kara and Sharon and Chris and Matthew and Denise and Carolyn and Merritt and Cheryl. Guys, I love all y'all. Diane, I'm so excited. Chris, Gina, Trisha, Mira, Miss Ari's here, Christine. We got a lot to talk about today. But we're just gonna let people dribble in for a minute as they do. Please do put your name and where you're from in the chat. We would love to know all of that. And my goodness, y'all, I'm a poet and I didn't know it today. All right, so welcome, 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 friends, to today's session of Sorting Soup, the Ladle in Literature Society. It is good to be back in this little Zoom square of solidarity and curiosity and critical thinking together. And today we are finishing chapter 3, the erasure of gender and identity, and moving through chapter 4 on Christian nationalism in policy. These chapters ask us to look honestly at how power tries to control bodies and erase identities and sanctify oppression with religious and political language. And to notice where those patterns are showing up right around us now. If we have time, we'll also dip into chapter 6 from Lessons of Cats for Surviving Fascism. That chapter gives us a different kind of toolkit, small, stubborn acts of survival, alertness, boundaries, and rest that can help us navigate heavy systems without losing ourselves. As we move through this conversation, a few invitations. Notice where these chapters echo what you're seeing in your organizing, your community, or even your family. Share not just analysis, but also feelings. Your grief, your anger, your confusion, or your hope are all welcome here. And listen for the cat lessons if we get there. You may already be practicing. When you step back, when you pounce, or when you protect your energy. And thank you for bringing your brain, your heart, and your presence here today, y'all. You know, I'm so entirely grateful for your time. I know it's precious. Now, for some quick housekeeping, Rebecca, some logistics.
Yes, ma'am. Whoops. So here's our team: Cecilia, Beth, Melissa, Dr. Chris, and Boot Money. These are our facilitators. And then you have myself as timekeeper. So I'm going to be the person cracking the whip. If anybody is a little too long-winded, I'll try and crack softly. Um, I don't know if we have Adrian, and it doesn't look like we have Merle. So but we've got a great crew today. Okay, so sorting soup. We've talked about the purpose before of what sorting soup was originally intended to be. Um, Kind of a group space where we talk about the current events of the day and then come up with action items after analyzing those events. We're sort of in a book club type phase, so it is a little different, but we're studying Project 2025, and because knowledge is power. If you know what they're about and why they're doing it, um, it puts you a step ahead and lets you make better decisions. Um, so our group norms, we will have some discussion. And when we get to that discussion portion, you'll be able to raise your hand, your digital hand. Um, so that's the heart button in your Zoom menu that says react. And then once you click that, you'll have a raise hand option. So when we are making comments in the discussion, we ask that folks keep it civil and constructive, and ideally less than 2 minutes, so that everyone who would like to contribute has a chance to. And because some of this Project 2025 stuff is pretty hefty, pretty heavy, if you need to take a break, step away, do a little breather, and then come back when you're ready. As Cecilia mentioned, we are going to get a lot of reading done today. We're going to finish up chapter 3, which will focus on LGBTQ and gender identity, rights under attack. And then we'll move right into a real juicy chapter, which will be chapter 4 about Christian nationalism in policy. So once we get all that kind of read as a group, we will have a wonderful discussion. And if there's time, we'll have a little palate cleanser here at the end, which will be about demanding food with assertiveness. So we'll all get a little, if we have time, we'll get a punch of energy that'll help us um, keep on going. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Cecilia so that we can all get grounded before we start getting reading.
Okay. So we're going to take just a few minutes to arrive together. If you're comfortable, let your eyes close or soften your gaze. Put your feet on the floor if you can, or just let your hands rest wherever they feel supported. Soften your body, pull up your spine, or just be still. First, just notice your
Mm.
body, okay? Notice where you're holding tension, your jaw, your shoulders, chest, belly. On your next exhale, let each of those places loosen just a little bit, as if you're setting down a heavy bag you've been carrying. Now bring your attention to your breath without changing it yet. Feel one inhale from start to finish and one exhale from start to finish. And let your breath be exactly as it is, and just follow it for a couple of cycles. We'll shift into a simple pattern. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. So breathe in through your nose for the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold gently at the top for 4, 2, 3, 4. And exhale slowly through your mouth for 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, inhale for 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 2, 3, 4. And exhale for 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Do that 2 more times at your own pace. And let each exhale be a quiet release of some part of today's weight. Now let your breath return to its natural rhythm. And with each inhale, silently think here. And with each exhale, silently think now. Here and now. Let that be your whole job for a few breaths. As organizers, the work asks a lot: to witness harm, analyze systems, and still show up with love. But in this bardo, in this in-between moment, give yourself permission not to fix anything, not to plan the next move, just to exist and breathe. If any images or headlines or situations from the chapters arise, imagine placing them on a shelf beside you for these few minutes. They are still real, still important, and you can come back to them. But they do not get to live in your lungs right now. Take one deeper inhale, filling it all the way to your ribs and back. With one long, complete exhale, letting your shoulders drop. And when you're ready, start to bring small movement back into your body. Wiggle your fingers and toes. Roll your shoulders. Maybe stretch your neck. If your eyes were closed, you can blink them open and come back to the room. Carry this one simple truth into the discussion. Your nervous system matters as much as your analysis. You're allowed to be grounded and resourced, even while you face hard things. All right, now onto the agenda. But real quick, before we get started, I just wanted to thank the entire Sorting Soup team for covering for me last week. Everyone should get their vaccines, but for those of us who are more sensitive, for example, I have fibromyalgia and degenerative disc disease and trigeminal neuralgia and other pain issues. Anyway, I should have gotten them separately, so it knocked me on my bottom. So I thank you to everybody who covered for me last week. I thought I could bust right through it. I was wrong, but y'all did amazing in my absence, and you're amazing. So do we have anybody willing to read the end of chapter 3? Starting at the erasure of gender and identity. Ooh-wee.
And I can get us started if that would help as a warm-up.
Sure.
All
Actually, I don't.
right.
Go ahead.
Yes?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Erasure of gender and identity. In the political vision advanced by Project 2025, identity is not viewed as a complex and evolving aspect of human life, but as a fixed and state-sanctioned category. The project treats the growing social recognition of gender diversity, non-binary identities, and fluid expressions of sexuality as a threat, not only to tradition, but to the national order itself. In response, it promotes a systematic rollback of policies, protections, and public norms that affirm the existence and dignity of LGBTQ plus individuals. This effort constitutes nothing less than a coordinated erasure of identity. This erasure is both ideological and administrative. On one level, it is framed in the language of values, defending the natural family, protecting the children from confusing ideologies, and preserving traditional gender roles. On another, it is executed through granular changes in law, funding, education policy, healthcare regulations, and public discourse. The intent is not simply to disapprove of nonconforming identities, it is to render them invisible and legally irrelevant. 1. Defining gender by law. Project 2025 begins its erasure at the most fundamental level, legal definition. Its authors argue for federal laws and regulations that define gender strictly as binary, immutable, and biologically determined at birth. This includes rolling back Obama-era policies that recognized gender identity in federal data collection, education regulations, housing protections, and healthcare mandates. By redefining gender as a biological category tied exclusively to sex assigned at birth, the project enables a cascade of exclusions. Transgender and non-binary individuals lose access to accurate identity documents, inclusive healthcare, gender-appropriate facilities, and protection from discrimination. The legal system in this framework ceases to recognize their existence. 2. Targeting transgender youth. One of the most politically charged and strategically central areas of Project 2025 is its focus on transgender minors. Under the guise of protecting children, the project supports banning gender-affirming medical care for youth, including puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and social transition practices, even when recommended by doctors and supported by parents. These bans are not isolated proposals. They are accompanied by efforts to criminalize providers, investigate parents for child abuse, and revoke the licenses of medical professionals who offer affirming care. The result is a climate of fear and forced medical conformity that denies trans youth the right to exist authentically. Beyond healthcare, Project 2025 supports banning trans students from participating in school sports consistent with their gender identity, using correct pronouns in classrooms, or accessing bathrooms and locker rooms that align with their identities. This is enforced not only through law, but through federal funding mechanisms, threatening schools and districts with the loss of resources unless they comply. 3. Eliminating federal protections. The project also calls for the dismantling of federal regulations that prohibit anti-LGBTQ+ discrimination. This includes repealing interpretations of Title VII and Title IX. I was never very good at the Roman numeral things. That extend workplace and education protections to LGBTQ+ individuals, gutting the application of the Fair Housing Act for LGBTQ+ renters and homeowners, and stripping sexual orientation and gender identity from federal diversity initiatives. By removing identity-based protections from these core civil rights frameworks, Project 2025 relegates LGBTQ+ Americans to a second-class legal status. They may still technically be citizens, but they are no longer equally protected under the law. 4. Defunding and silencing advocacy. Beyond law and policy, Project 2025 aims to financially and culturally isolate LGBTQ+ advocacy organizations. It proposes eliminating federal grants to organizations that promote sexual orientation and gender ideology, ending DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion programs in federal agencies, and banning LGBTQ+ materials from public libraries and schools. The project views these entities not as civil society actors, but as ideological threats. The end goal is to remove them from public life, cutting off not only their funding, but their platforms and legitimacy. 5. Reasserting traditional, quote unquote, norms. Project 2025 presents its erasure of identity as a moral imperative. In its language, gender nonconformity is a form of cultural decay. Same-sex relationships are framed as deviating from the natural order, and trans visibility is portrayed as indoctrination. These rhetorical strategies are not new. They echo historical patterns of marginalization used by authoritarian regimes to justify the repression of minority groups. The framework being built is one in which the state decides who you are, and more importantly, who you are allowed to be. Individual self-determination, long recognized as a core democratic value, is subordinated to a narrow, state-approved definition of identity. That definition is binary, heterosexual, and compliant. 6. Cultural conditioning through policy. The most insidious aspect of this erasure is not its violence, but its normalization. Through consistent messaging, policy alignment, and cultural pressure, Project 2025 seeks to create a society in which gender diversity is not only unrecognized, but unthinkable. In this society, LGBTQ plus identities become taboo topics, relegated to the margins, treated as moral failings or mental illness. This conditioning extends to children, teachers, healthcare providers, and even law enforcement. The goal is not to win a debate, it is to eliminate the conversation altogether, entirely, to make queerness disappear, not through censorship alone, but through cultural redesign. Conclusion: a future of forced conformity. Erasure is not always loud. It can happen through silence, paperwork, defunding, and fear. Project 2025 constructs a world in which LGBTQ plus people are written out of the law, pushed out of public life, and erased from memory. It is not enough that they be denied new rights. They must also lose the ones they already fought for and won. This is not the absence of policy, it is the presence of an anti-policy, a counter-revolution aimed at dismantling recognition itself. And if allowed to proceed, it would establish a precedent with devastating consequences. That identity is not personal, not sacred, not free, but conditional, granted by the state, and revocable.
Thank you, Rebecca. All right, so there you can see their concept map for their strategies to revoke civil rights advancements. I mean, it's basic, but pretty, they're going along pretty well, like clockwork, with his executive orders and whatnot that he's been trying to do. Okay.
Okay. Do we want to proceed to chapter 2 or
chapter 4?
Yes, 4, the number that comes after 3.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to talk more about the end of chapter 3 throughout chapter 4. They go along. I can read the beginning, and we'll see if anybody else wants to raise their hand by the time I get through this list of ridiculous. I mean, it's not ridiculous. I'm just trying to deflect, y'all. That's how I roll. Okay, chapter 4, Christian nationalism and policy. Religion as political doctrine. Okay. In the American political tradition, the separation of church and state is not merely a legal construct, it is a cultural safeguard. It exists to prevent the domination of public institutions by any singular religious ideology, thereby preserving a pluralistic society where belief is personal, not imposed. Project 2025 seeks to dismantle this foundational boundary. Through a calculated intertwining of Christian fundamentalism with state power, it advances a model of governance where religion becomes political doctrine and public policy is shaped not by secular deliberation, but by theological command. The project is explicit in its aims: to reorient the federal government around what it calls, quote unquote, biblically based principles. This phrase is not rhetorical. It signals a profound reordering of the constitutional hierarchy, where moral authority is no longer derived from democratic consensus or individual rights, but from a selective interpretation of Christian scripture. In this vision, religion is not a private matter. It is a governing instrument. The influence of Christian nationalism in Project 2025 is not incidental. It is structural. The coalition behind the project includes organizations and individuals with deep ties to the religious right: Liberty Council, Alliance Defending Freedom, Family Research Council, and others. These groups have spent decades lobbying for policies that align American law with conservative evangelical morality. With Project 2025, they are no longer content with influence. They seek dominion. This dominion manifests in multiple ways. Number one, reframing the Constitution through theology. One of the most dangerous elements of Project 2025 is its effort to reinterpret the Constitution itself as a Christian document, thereby recasting the entire legal framework of the United States. This involves elevating religious liberty to an absolute right above all others, even when it results in discrimination, exclusion, or harm to others. The First Amendment's Establishment Clause is reinterpreted to forbid government hostility to religion, but not to prohibit religious favoritism. In this model, policies that promote Christian values are not only acceptable, they are encouraged. The government is tasked with protecting Christianity from secular attacks, rather than ensuring neutrality among faiths. Number two, inserting religious doctrine into education and public life. Project 2025 supports policies that would mandate or promote Christian education, school prayer, and the inclusion of biblical teachings in curricula. It frames this as not as indoctrination, but as the restoration of moral clarity in a society it views as lost to relativism and secular decay. This includes proposals to fund religious charter schools with public money, allow teachers to proselytize in the classroom, and strip federal protections from students who object to religious content. The line between education and evangelism is deliberately blurred, and schools become arenas for ideological contest. Beyond education, this doctrinal approach extends to public holidays, government messaging, and national symbolism. Project 2025 envisions a nation where Christianity is not simply represented in public life, it is embedded in the very language of the state. Number three, redefining religious freedom as a weapon. Traditionally, religious freedom has meant the right to practice one's faith without state interference. Project 2025 redefines this freedom to include the right to impose religious beliefs on others, particularly in business, healthcare, and education. Religious freedom becomes not a shield, but a sword. This is most clearly seen in the advocacy for conscience exemptions. Under Project 2025, employers could deny coverage for contraceptives, pharmacists could refuse to fill prescriptions, and businesses could decline service to LGBTQ plus individuals, all in the name of religious belief. These acts of exclusion are not viewed as discrimination, but as moral acts of resistance. Number four, targeting religious minorities and secular institutions. Christian nationalism is not a pluralistic ideology. It defines legitimacy narrowly and often implicitly excludes Muslims, Jews, atheists, and other non-Christian citizens from the core conception of quote unquote real Americans. Project 2025 does not explicitly call for persecution, but its policies marginalize any belief system that does not conform to its chosen moral framework. This marginalization can take the form of funding cuts, surveillance, denial of federal contracts, and the rollback of civil rights protections. The cumulative effect is to create a government that privileges one religion while rendering all others suspect or subordinate. Number 5, consolidating religious power through policy staffing. A critical component of Project 2025 is the strategic placement of religiously motivated individuals in key policy positions. These appointees are not simply conservative. They are often selected for their ideological commitments and willingness to integrate those beliefs into the functions of government. This includes judges, agency heads, education officials, and even scientists tasked with overseeing public health. In such a system, policy is no longer derived from pluralistic values, but from doctrinal conformity. Evidence, expertise, and precedent are subordinated to faith-based interpretations of morality and human purpose. Number 6, undermining secular governance as an ideal. Finally, Project 2025 views secularism itself as a threat. It casts neutral governance as morally weak, spiritually empty, and politically dangerous. In its place, it seeks to instill a moral order rooted in obedience, not just to law, but to religious authority. This represents a fundamental rejection of Enlightenment values, including the separation of church and state, the autonomy of the individual, and the sovereignty of reason. Instead, we are offered a theopolitical vision of America, where citizenship is tethered to creed and dissent is framed as heresy. Project 2025 does not propose an overt theocracy. There will be no official church, no constitutional amendment declaring Christianity as the state religion. What it proposes is more insidious, a slow, deliberate baptism of state functions in which Christianity becomes the moral and legal compass for public life. It does not need to outlaw other religions. It only needs to make them irrelevant. The danger here is not just to religious minorities, but to democracy itself. Once the state adopts a particular theology as its governing framework, pluralism becomes treason, compromise becomes sin, and law becomes scripture. This is the future that Project 2025 envisions, and unless it is understood and confronted, it may become the reality in which we are all asked to live. Dr. Melissa.
I was just offering to read. Is that all
Okay.
right? You want me?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah.
Yes, go ahead and read until who is real America.
Okay.
Affordable.
Okay. When theology replaces the Constitution. The strength of the American constitutional order has long rested on its ability to serve as a secular framework for a pluralistic society. It is a document that articulates shared rights and limitations not based on divine revelation, but on reason, compromise, and the recognition of individual dignity in a diverse and ever-changing nation. In the vision proposed by Project 2025, this foundation is quietly but systematically supplanted. In its place, a new order is imagined, one in which theological commitments take precedence over constitutional principles and public life is reorganized. This process of substitution is not enacted with the overt tools of theocracy. There are no formal proclamations of a state religion, no constitutional amendments declaring divine authority. Rather, what occurs is a slower, more insidious transformation, a constitutional displacement that reinterprets legal norms through the lens of a singular moral doctrine. In this project, theology becomes the implicit constitution, unwritten, unratified, but functionally sovereign. The first terrain of this transformation is interpretation. Under Project 2025, the Constitution is not rejected outright, but reread through the eyes of religious traditionalism. The First Amendment, for example, is no longer treated as a dual protection, both of individual religious expression and from governmental religious imposition. Instead, it is weaponized. Well, I lost it there. Instead, it is. Let's see if I can find that. Yeah, thank you. It is weaponized to privilege religious voices in public institutions, allowing expressions of faith, almost exclusively Christian in character, to re-enter the machinery of the state. This inversion turns the Establishment Clause on its head. What once served to limit state entanglement with religion is now invoked to protect and expand religious influence within state operations. The legal basis for this shift draws from a growing body of jurisprudence shaped by judges who espouse the originalist or textualist philosophies, but who simultaneously interpret the founders' intent through a lens that reflects their own cultural and religious worldview. This judicial drift allows for decisions that privilege expressions of Christian morality under the guise of constitutional fidelity, creating a framework in which the values of a particular faith tradition are indistinguishable from the values of the nation itself. Nowhere is this more evident than in Project 2025's approach to the executive branch. The presidency, under this model, is not simply a political office tasked with enforcing the law. It becomes a moral pulpit. The individuals selected to lead key federal departments are chosen not for their administrative competence, but for their alignment with the theological values prioritized by the movement. In this schema, the role of government shifts from managing a complex and pluralistic society to shepherding it toward moral correctness as defined by religious orthodoxy. This evolution marks a rupture with the core Enlightenment principle that public policy should be grounded in secular reasoning, accessible to all regardless of belief. The authority of Scripture, while meaningful to many private citizens, becomes inappropriate when elevated to the level of policy imperative. Yet, Project 2025 deliberately blurs this boundary, asserting that laws derived from biblical norms are not only permissible, but necessary to restore the nation's moral health. In doing so, it replaces deliberative governance with theological absolutism. The implications of this shift are profound. In a nation where the law is shaped by religious dogma, dissent becomes not just political disagreement, but moral deviance. Policies derived from pluralistic negotiation give way to decrees rooted in divine certainties. Citizens whose values or identities fall outside the prescribed moral framework, whether due to religion, sexuality, gender, or ideology, find themselves increasingly excluded from full participation in civic life. They are no longer simply minorities. They are anomalies in a political order that has made spiritual conformity a condition of legitimacy. This transformation also exerts pressure on institutions that were historically designed to resist majoritarian tyranny. Agencies meant to uphold civil rights, manage public health, or ensure educational neutrality are reoriented to reflect a set of religious imperatives. Over time, these institutions cease to function as instruments of democratic balance and become extensions of a moral mission. Policy decisions once justified on empirical grounds, data, precedent, public welfare, are instead filtered through the question of religious acceptability. What is ethical becomes what is doctrinal. What is lawful becomes what is blessed. Even the language of political debate changes under this model. The vocabulary of liberty, equality, and justice is reinterpreted through the lens of theological conviction. Freedom becomes the freedom to obey religious mandates. Equality is redefined to exclude so-called immoral lifestyles. Justice becomes punishment not of crime but of sin. And once these definitions take hold, they are self-reinforcing. Any attempt to restore secular norms can be dismissed as an attack on faith itself. It is essential to understand that this is not a grassroots cultural shift happening independently of power structures. It is a project of governance supported by legal strategies, political networks, and an increasingly sympathetic judiciary. It is made possible not only by the erosion of institutional safeguards, but by a vacuum of civic resistance, a silence born of exhaustion, disorientation, and fear. When theology replaces the Constitution, what is lost is not only the neutrality of the state, but its legitimacy as a mediator among equals. The state no longer serves all. It serves a chosen people. It no longer interprets laws with impartiality. It enforces dogma with authority. It no longer balances conflicting rights. It affirms one truth at the expense of all others. The project's proponents will deny that this is their goal. They will speak of tradition, of order, of a return to moral clarity. But behind these words lies a deeper ambition to make the state an extension of the church, not in name but in function. And if this transformation is allowed to proceed unchecked, the American experiment will not end with a bang, but with a prayer written into every policy and a scripture whispered behind every law.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Melissa.
Thank you.
Christine.
Okay, this jumped.
Yeah, there. Who is real America?
Okay. Who is real America? Beneath the policy proposals and legal strategies of Project 2025 lies a far more powerful and dangerous narrative, the construction of a I'm going to read this without my glasses. National identity rooted in exclusion. It is not enough in the worldview of its architects to alter laws or agencies. They seek something deeper, a redefinition of the American self. In this redefinition, not all citizens are equal stakeholders. Not all communities are part of the nation's moral body. Now my sister's calling me. All right. There is instead a preferred citizen, a rightful heir to the republic's destiny. Project 2025. Is that coming through?
No,
Okay.
you're
Does not state this openly, but the implication of its rhetoric, its policies, and its cultural appeals point to a clear answer to the question it quietly raises. Who is real America? The answer, as constructed by the ideology behind Project 2025, is neither metaphorical nor accidental. Real America is white, Christian, heterosexual, and culturally conservative. It resides in the suburban and rural heartlands, upholds traditional family values, and views progressivism, multiculturalism, and globalism as existential threats. Real America honors a mythologized past, one in which the country was strong before the rise of secularism, feminism, LGBTQ plus. God. I'm going to have to take
That's okay. I can take over.
okay, because if I don't answer my phone for my sister, she'll be over here.
I understand.
Oh, thank you.
No problem. LGBTQ plus visibility and civil rights movements that complicated the older, simpler narrative. This conception of the nation is not new. It has long existed at the fringes of political life, appearing in the dog whistles, regional myths, and political slogans that promise a return to greatness. But Project 2025 brings it into the administrative core. Through federal appointments, agency missions, and public messaging, the project operationalizes the idea that only certain Americans are legitimate, while others are, at best, tolerated anomalies, or, at worst, enemies within. This narrative begins by drawing stark cultural lines. Real Americans in this framework are those whose values align with what Project 2025 calls the natural law, a term deliberately ambiguous, but consistently interpreted to reflect conservative Christian social doctrine. Those who live outside this value system, immigrants, religious minorities, LGBTQ plus individuals, progressive academics, or those engaged in grassroots activism, are portrayed not as fellow citizens participating in a shared political project, but as corrosive forces. They are threats, not because of what they do, but because of what they represent, a disruption to an imagined cultural unity. The policy implications of this are sweeping. In education, for instance, Project 2025 seeks to eliminate curricula that reflect diverse histories or critical perspectives on American identity. Terms like critical race theory, gender ideology, or woke indoctrination, heaven forbid, become shorthand for any attempt to acknowledge the complexity of the American experience. The goal is to narrow the range of acceptable narratives, to discipline memory itself, and to ensure that young Americans are taught not pluralism, but allegiance to a singular, heroic past. This revision extends to immigration policy, where the trope of a real America intersects with nativist and racialized fears. Immigrants are not only regulated, they are often cast as incompatible with American values. The bureaucratic machinery proposed by Project 2025 would centralize immigration enforcement, expand surveillance of immigrant communities, and redefine public charge rules to restrict access to healthcare and social services. More subtly, but no less powerfully, it would embed in the law a cultural message that to be American is not merely a legal status, but a cultural performance, one that only some can authentically fulfill. In the realm of civil rights, the logic is no less severe. Protections that affirm the dignity and rights of historically marginalized communities are recast as special privileges, or even as impositions on the majority. Anti-discrimination laws become obstacles to religious liberty. Affirmative action is reframed as anti-meritocratic. LGBTQ plus protections are portrayed as assaults on family and tradition. In this inversion, the groups most vulnerable to exclusion are painted as aggressors, while those who wield structural power are recast as victims under siege. The media and cultural institutions are also marked as enemies of the real. Public broadcasters, academic institutions, and even libraries become targets in a campaign to delegitimize any forum that deviates from the state's preferred cultural message. The intellectual class is dismissed as elitist, globalist, and spiritually hollow. Expertise is replaced with ideology.
Dialogue is replaced with propaganda. What remains is a vacuum in which truth is determined not by debate or evidence, but by alignment with the values of the dominant narrative. At the heart of all of this is a powerful psychological tool: nostalgia. Project 2025 leverages a vision of an America that once was and could be again. This vision is not rooted in historical accuracy, but in a selective memory of national greatness, strong families, clear roles, moral clarity, and social cohesion. The fact that this era excluded vast swaths of the population is not an oversight. It is the very point. The nostalgia offered is one of control and simplicity, in which hierarchy is natural and dissent is destabilizing. This mythic America does not reflect the real past, nor does it serve the actual complexity of the present. But it is emotionally resonant and politically effective. It creates a sense of belonging for those who feel displaced by modernity and globalization or demographic change. It offers a scapegoat for the anxieties of economic insecurity or cultural irrelevance. And most importantly, it provides a moral justification for policies that would otherwise appear draconian: the purging of institutions, the repression of speech, the surveillance of communities, the marginalization of dissent. Real America in the Project 2025 vision is not a place on a map. It is a moral category. And like all exclusive moral categories, it depends on the invention of its opposite. For real America to exist, there must be unreal Americans, those who do not belong, who cannot be trusted, who must be disciplined, watched, or removed. This logic is the seedbed of authoritarian politics. It justifies extraordinary measures in the name of unity, even if that unity is only achieved through exclusion. The Constitution offers a different vision, one in which citizenship is not contingent upon conformity and identity is not a condition of belonging. It imagines a nation composed not of one people, but of many, not of one story, but of competing truths held together by shared rules. Project 2025, by contrast, reduces the American experiment to a question of authenticity, policed from above. When the state begins to decide who counts as real, it begins to write others out of the national story, not metaphorically, but through law, surveillance, funding, and cultural control. And when those exclusions become normalized, what follows is not just the erosion of rights, but the erosion of the republic itself. Now, I'd like for Bruce to put his hand back up because he had his hand up earlier, and I'm fairly certain it was to comment on something that was said. And so go ahead, Bruce, get us started.
No, not just something. I mean,
I
the
know.
whole,
I figured
the
you
whole-
took notes. I figured you took notes, so you just go ahead and get us started, and we'll get going from there.
okay, the whole thing is outrageous.
I know.
The Constitution, what we've seen is the expansion of rights, not taking them away. Plus, there's been a separation of church and state, which this does not. It even says it's taking it away. That other religions, well, let's start with this Christian nationalism. It's imposing the values of Christian nationalism on everyone, and any other beliefs are irrelevant and might even be considered in almost like treason. It's against the rules of the order, and the enemies within. That's the
Good quote.
statement they
Yeah.
made.
Yeah.
So, and right now that we have anti-discrimination laws, those are thrown out. We have. I want to talk a little bit about the courts. The Supreme Court has shown a little bit towards this with a few decisions it's made, and then it's not decided that way in others. In order to get this through, they're going to need court interpretations from the Supreme Court or lower courts as well, but it could come up to the Supreme Court. Let's give the example of the Ten Commandments being in schools. Texas, Oklahoma, and I think another state were doing that. Clearly, under current law, it's unconstitutional. You can't have religion in education that way. However, my thought has always been they want to take this up to the Supreme Court.
Mhm.
They want to get the court to reverse. I think it's a Schempp case, I think was the name of it, from around 1962. That basically, when I was in elementary school, way back when in the early 60s, we used to read the Bible in class every day, just little pieces of it, but we read it. And then it stopped. I wondered why. Then I learned later it's because of a Supreme Court decision.
Yeah.
And the Ten Commandments, you can't have them in the classroom under current law, but they want to test it, I think, with the Supreme Court. And I know it's been challenged. So it may get to the court. We had the decision a couple of years ago about the coach of a team who wanted to pray on the sidelines or after a game or during some point.
He wanted to pray on the field.
Yes, on the field. And it was not mandatory for the students to join him, but let's face it, wouldn't you feel pressured to join your coach to do it? But the
Right.
court didn't recognize that, and the court said he had a right to do that.
Right.
So that's a little bit of chipping away. If I recall correctly, and I could be wrong, the point of the LGBTQ marriage and the persons with the cake, if I recall, they upheld the religious liberty of the person with the making the cake not to serve them. That's another chipping away of LGBTQ rights. But on the other hand, we had this year, just a month ago, that crazy clerk in Kentucky who did not want to give marriage certificates to LGBTQ people. The court would not accept certiorari or would not accept the appeal of that case, which is good. But we'll see what happens in the future as to LGBTQ rights, but they may go after it. But in order to accomplish these things, they're going to need a court that's willing to go this far. We haven't seen it go that far yet, which means when Clarence Thomas and Alito resign and Trump is about to appoint replacements, they've got to be questioned extensively relating to these particular issues. And yes, I understand that some of them lie during the proceedings for appointments. But the bottom line is these are crucial issues to get in with them to make sure that these people don't hold those type of views that they're going to impose one's religion on others. This is contrary to what this country was formed. You know, people came here for religious freedom to be able to practice any, and there's plenty of different religions, and or you can have no religion. So that they're going to need to implement this, judges willing to uphold it, and we've got to stop that at every level that we can, and make sure that these people don't espouse those type of views. And I won't talk. I was told 2 minutes. I probably went over the 2. So that's it for me for now. but I find it totally outrageous, totally un-American. And if they want it, they need to go to another country because that's not our Constitution.
Everything you say, 100%. And I'm reading in my Mother Jones that I got this, for January, February. Aura of invincibility. Meet the new age healers behind Florida's anti-vax surgeon general. And he's talking about the same thing about implementing his own religious views on your state because and his how that had to do with him just saying, we're not going to have any vaccinations. Let's just create this really free place down here in Florida where we don't vaccinate anyone. And yeah,
He's a DeSantis appointee. So what do you
yes.
expect?
I know. And that's what I'm saying. Like, and they're doing that. They're appointing people just like that. So thank you, Bruce.
Yes, they are.
Okay, Constance, you are up next.
Yeah, and you can see that proponents of these horrendous views are often people who don't understand the power of education, don't understand the power of a pluralistic society, that who are in fact afraid of all of those things because and they see they may see their children leaving for the big city and that scares them, and they may see their kids not practicing religion anymore, that scares them, and so they've just got to hang on to the old beliefs, and it gives them solace, it gives them something to believe in, and it gives them a sense of superiority, I guess. For all they have to suffer, they can still feel superior. I do want to just read a few quotes from the founding fathers on secularism.
Yes,
Um,
please.
Thomas Jefferson said, "I consider the government of the United States as interdicted by the Constitution from intermeddling with religious institutions, their doctrines, discipline, or exercises." John Adams says, "The government of the United States is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion." James Madison said, "Religion and government will both exist in greater purity, the less they are mixed together."
Exactly.
George Washington says, "The United States is not a Christian nation." And then Thomas Jefferson has another quote: "Erecting the wall of separation between church and state is absolutely essential in a free society."
Yeah.
So any jurist who claims that they are, an originalist to the Constitution, that make their decisions that way, should kind of, go back and read what the founders actually believe about not being a secular society.
Nora, okay, what this has to do with the Bible. White nationalism utilizes the Bible to their advantage, but they are not a religion. So they utilize it for control. They utilize they cherry pick little scripture here, scripture there, and they will use that to control the evangelical right, or just the right in general. And that is what I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with the real teachings of the Bible, okay? That is the biggest point, that if you take anything away about white nationalism has nothing to do with true Christianity. It's all about taking advantage of true Christianity. But okay, on to Melissa. Go on.
I had two things. One, I think we need a really good counter narrative to the religious right doctrines. So it's something just we can work on going forward. And also, there's history that we should take a look at with how the evangelical Christians became co-opted by the conservative movements in this country, and I think it was starting when I was graduating from college, and definitely reinforced during the Reagan years and so on and so forth. But there was people who made their names, and those evangelists, those TV evangelists who made a real name for themselves. Pat
Jerry
Robertson
Falwell.
and yes, Falwell. He was a key person in that. Yeah, and they. Because they co-opted people to believe things that are not in their best interest. I mean, really, those folks were not getting at the health and wealth churches too, right?
Yep. Prosperity gospel. God, I despise that.
If if a person give money to your church, you're going to have more money yourself, huh? And then that if you believe, and you will automatically be rewarded with money and health. You're not going to ever die. And I just remember when my stepson's minister got cancer, and he was a bad actor, I have to say. Besides, but he didn't deserve. But they were up there wearing gold stuff and all that. It was just really. But this is a distortion of religion. It's a distortion of even for someone who's evangelical, it's a distortion. It's not that, the Bible does not say you're going to be wealthy in this world if you believe if you have Jesus into your heart. That's not what it says. It doesn't mean you'll never die.
No, it actually tells you that your treasures are in heaven.
There we go.
Store your treasures in heaven.
So we should take a look at that history, because people need to be re-educated, and they're not getting. But people do buy. As far as Nora's question, people do. People who are really evangelical buy into this and feel like this is for me, and it's taking. I talked to a woman who didn't have health care when Obama was running, and she was like, and I think this health care for everyone is terrible, and I was like, you don't have health care.
Right? And they get talked into voting against their own interests.
Totally.
And I completely agree.
So how do we kind of help educate people in a way? This has to be it has to be on the emotional side, because it's not like you can give people facts and they're going to go, I guess my religion is wrong, or my pastor is wrong. Not that the religion is wrong, but the pastor is wrong. So
all right. Thank you, Dr. Melissa. Much appreciated. All right, Miss Benita, what's up?
Well, I just have a question. I don't have any historical knowledge on this, but
that's okay.
When I was in grade school between 1961 and 1964, was religion and education combined? Because I remember in third and fourth grade lining up and walking down the block to a Christian church, and we would have an hour of like Bible study. And then we would walk back to school, and it was okay. And then I changed schools, and then all we had was we'd always say the Lord's Prayer before the Pledge of Allegiance, and then it stopped. So can somebody explain to me? I know Bruce said something about the Supreme Court changing things, so I have no knowledge of that.
Okay, so the two Supreme Court decisions in the early 1960s reshaped the relationship between religion and public schools. In Engel versus Vitale, 1962, the court held that a state-written, school-sponsored prayer, even if voluntary and non-denominational, violated the First Amendment's Establishment Clause. And in Abington School District versus Schempp, in 1963, the court ruled that mandatory Bible readings and recitation of the Lord's Prayer in public schools were also unconstitutional as state-sponsored religious exercises. So yes, before those two things, you probably had them on the reg, because instead of making up their own, school, that was part of their lesson plans, right? They didn't make up those. It's easy to teach out of the Bible. They still do that today. When you homeschool, a lot of your lesson plan comes out of the Bible. If you teach from those type of an evangelical homeschool plan. So yeah, I believe, and I'm sure Bruce would be able to tell you more about that, but there's that.
Well, I was just confused because as Bruce said something about the Supreme Court changed some things, I thought, well, yeah, I do remember everything just kind of came to a stop, as a kid.
I guess they probably didn't explain it very well then, did they?
No, I didn't even know that the Indians were run off their land. I just thought they built teepees and showed people how to plant corn. So see how they do us? That's all. Thank you.
Benita. All right. Rebecca. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I grew up in Missouri, so I also benefited from Missouri public school education. Yeah, there were some gaps there, Benita, so I kind of don't blame you. Um, I wanted to point out the part that was talking about how, yes, it upholds kind of an ideal model citizen, but in order to do that, you have to kind of define the anti-citizen. And there's like almost a majority that
Right?
don't fit into that. And so obviously my mind is going to immigrants and LGBTQ and, indigenous people and like anybody who's not white or straight or, you know, all of the things. So what I'm taking away from that is that they're trying to sow division for anybody who's outside of that circle. Take away your power and make it hard for us to get together because we are different from this definition. And I guess I would consider women as part of that. Yeah, it's a really sneaky ploy and I don't like it. So I'm glad we're studying it so that we can be smart about what they're doing and fight back.
I agree. And what really kills me is nowhere in the Bible does it say to become Rome and impose your will upon other citizens. That is not what it says. Matthew 28 that's not what Matthew 28 says. So if they just read their Bible honestly, and this is where the Christian nationalism comes in. They cherry pick a scripture and they take it out of context and they just want to use it to their advantage. Dr. Melissa.
I was originally going to respond about the religion because I also remember having prayer in school in 1960, and it was after that, a couple of years later, that the laws were enacted. But I was guessing that, Benita, that the reason your school you went down the street to another place to do the prayer and the religious ed so it wouldn't be in school. I mean, it probably was a little bit of a getting around that rule, which doesn't really work. But no, I thought that, Rebecca, you made a really good point about how divisive it is, and that it's us against them, us versus them mentality that it's creating. And then of course it's said directly that this is hierarchical. It creates hierarchies, and some people are more, animal farmers. Some animals are more, some pigs are more something than others. Some are more than others, so some citizens are more citizens than others. So it's criminal. There we go.
Yeah, I agree. Miss Constance, you
Yes. So looking back in the day when we had real presidents who believed in the Constitution and secularism and everything, back in the time when the banning prayer in public schools decision came down, President John Kennedy said this: "The Supreme Court has made its judgment, and a good many people obviously will disagree with it. Others will agree with it. But I think that it is important for us, if we are going to maintain our constitutional principles, that we support the Supreme Court decision, even when we may not agree with them." In addition, we have, in this case, a very simple remedy, and that is to pray ourselves. And I would think that it would be a welcome reminder to every American family that we can pray a good deal more at home, and we can attend our churches with a good deal more fidelity, and we can make the true meaning of prayer much more important in the lives of our children. That power is very much open to us. And I would hope that as a result of this decision, that all American parents will intensify their efforts at home, and the rest of us will support the Constitution and the responsibility of the Supreme Court in interpreting it, which is theirs and given to them by the Constitution.
Do you know what the biggest thing that I had issue with when I was teaching Sunday school was getting parents involved. Like they just didn't want to get involved. So,
Yeah. So they want the schools to do it, maybe?
they want the schools. They don't want to have anything to do with it. They want the schools to raise their kids. They want
Yeah.
the schools to teach them right from wrong. They want the schools to do everything, guys. Oh my gosh. And now they want our government to take care of it for them.
Yeah.
They just want to check
Right.
out, like
Right.
mentally, emotionally, physically, from having any responsibility whatsoever. I don't.
And I like the way he stressed the importance of the Constitution and what the Constitution stands for, and what and what a secular society can do privately if they disagree with the Constitution. But we have a Constitution for a reason. And I liked his emphasis on that. And I like I like presidents who support the Constitution myself.
Which
As do I.
president was that? I missed it.
That was JFK, John Kennedy.
That's a favorite of mine.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, Constance.
Welcome.
Bruce, you are up.
Yeah, JFK was my favorite president and was my inspiration to go into public service. I had to deliver a leadership story about myself, and that's what I said. But then again, I lived in Massachusetts at the time he became president, so we were fans of his. And some of the Kennedys occasionally marched in our 4th of July parade, our local parade. As far as the religion in schools, yes, early 1960s were those Supreme Court decisions, and before that we did read the Bible in class, but it was more like at the beginning of the day with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we sang America the Beautiful or whatever. But we did not study the Bible. But the reason that person indicated they continued on for a few years, and sometimes Supreme Court decisions don't make their way down to the schools right away. An example would be 1969, happened to be my senior year in high school, was when the Tinker decision came out, which said those were the 2 students who wore anti-Vietnam War armbands, which all it had was a peace symbol on it. And the Supreme Court said that they were not disruptive of the classroom and therefore they could wear them. And it took a while before dress codes in schools were really liberated after that, because a lot of the things, like we weren't allowed to wear sneakers, we couldn't wear blue jeans, girls had to wear dresses, they couldn't wear pants. None of those things were disruptive. So I think a lot of that's just a few examples. We couldn't have sideburns below the middle of our ear. Those are the type of things in the dress code, and they changed as a result of Tinker, but it took a while, I think, for some districts to do that. Another thing that bothered me in what we read is, and you got to remember, there's also free speech in the First Amendment, and they said dissent is considered heresy. That's a First Amendment speech issue, not even a religion issue that they're going against. And when they talked about real Americans whom they idolized in the past, they're making this up, and they say the nostalgia is a vision, but it's selective and it isn't really the way it existed. The Leave It to Beaver moms, didn't really exist the way they show it on TV. And
Yeah, they
that
don't
sort
show
of
the
thing.
volume. Oh, sorry.
Huh?
I said they don't show the volume.
So a lot of what they're talking about, it's visionary and maybe what they want, but not the way things are or were.
I agree. 100%. They're trying to recreate a time that, first of all, didn't exist, and a time that the reality just wasn't that great for a majority of Americans. And oh my goodness, y'all. This, one of my biggest, when I thought about this, we just had Vision Forward, and I kept thinking they are defining their own villains in their own formula, and we are they.
Are we ever?
Yeah.
Didn't they like publicly proclaim that today? That or recently?
Well, he called us the enemies from within.
Yeah.
We fit that definition.
Yes, yes, yes.
And we also fit Antifa definition, unfortunately, the way he defines it, although we don't advocate violence at all.
Well, I think we have enough time to read chapter 6 if y'all want.
Just 1 second. Frank is trying to raise, he can't get his hand raised. No, it's Felix.
Felix.
Oh, is it Felix
Felix.
Tello? Can't get his
Yes,
hand
ma'am.
raised? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, Felix,
Well-
go ahead.
Good. Just a couple minutes. I want to introduce also myself, but I also want to say I want to interject a little bit of pragmatism into this. I'm a pragmatic progressive, so I'm also running for Congress. So it's my job to know how we're attacking these issues.
Mhm.
And I get the existential risk that the Heritage Foundation and the Trump administration is challenging us. So as a pragmatic person, we tend to divide up the things that we can do and the things that we need to take a little slower. So there is no one that's going to be able to change the First Amendment, right to free speech, right to practice our own religions and so forth, very easily. So the Heritage Foundation has a very steep hill to climb. We do have to monitor it. We have to watch it. We have to countersue every attempt that they try to interject religion into our public schools, into our society, and so forth, because that's our right. So from a congressional perspective, we're watching that on the basis of saying, hey, we have to watch this legally so that they don't introduce any societal mechanisms to influence their perspective on religion upon the rest of us. The other thing is that I'm listening to a lot of your understanding of what the risks are, right? But I think we need to start working towards what the solutions are into countering and what the action plan is, being very pragmatic. Instead of taking a look at the whole elephant, we need to take a look at what bites, what
Felix,
pieces.
is this your first time here?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
No. I apologize for interrupting. However, usually we do this week we
Okay.
ended the third
I'll shut up.
chapter,
I'll shut up.
and no. I'm just letting you know. I'm letting you know. We ended the third chapter and added on the fourth chapter, so we had like too much.
I was running around to the library and I got disconnected a couple times, so I knew I was going to be in trouble.
It's okay. And we have a hard stop at 6:30. So
Okay.
no worries. We want you to come back. Also, we have Sunday Seconds on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. where we do talk about a little bit more. We have a little bit more time with not as much of a hard stop. And so we have a little bit more time to talk about all of that
Okay.
with more action planning, because that's what Sorting Soup's all about. Okay,
Yep.
Ellen,
And we
you're up
have
next.
Vision Forward too.
And Vision
that's coming up in January. That's about messaging. So join us for that
Messaging
too.
and action plans.
Thank
But
you.
thank you, Felix. You're absolutely right. And I didn't
No,
mean it.
thank you for the couple minutes. I just wanted to interject that, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Ellen, did I get you, girl? There you go. You
Hey,
got a few
yeah,
minutes.
thank you. Yeah, I'll keep it short. I think this is, the most important reading, and Zoom, this is really important. And I agree with everything they've said, but I think there's one group that y'all aren't talking about, which are anti-vax Democrats like me who, there's a lot of science. I just think we have to have freedom of choice. And I've got I wasn't allowed to go to socialist conference without my passport. And so I would just add that as another freedom, in a way it's like religion or something, that if if you just don't want one, I think sadly, the Democratic Party and the Indivisible people have been so united, kind of like Citizens United, that, I don't think Bobby Kennedy or the guy in Florida even wanted to take it the vaccine way. It's just they wanted this mRNA. There's a lot of, it's different. It's a biological injection. And so the ideal of the Constitution is that we have freedom of speech, press, religion, in schools and everywhere to look at both sides. We need, like, the fairness doctrine of the Federal Communication Commission. And, it's, I just think as a party, I wish we could, have kind of scientific discussions of what's good and what's bad about this mRNA stuff.
I definitely think that
Mhm.
we do have those discussions, and I think the science historically has supported the use of
Well, yeah,
vaccination.
we're in two
So,
different echo chambers. And so there's a
I
lot of
hear you. I
science
hear you,
that the
Ellen.
other side isn't
I hear
hearing.
you that
Yeah,
this is
okay.
your passion
Yeah.
project.
Mhm.
I don't want to go down that
I'm
rabbit
running
hole.
for Congress, and I want us all united, because we really are. And I do have
So
insights into
I would
Zionism as the
recommend.
thing
I
that's
would.
divided us.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would
Okay.
recommend it that if you want people to unite, maybe hear what the people have to say
Yeah,
on
I
certain
do. We
issues.
we
So
need both to hear each other on that issue. These kind of issues, because there shouldn't be a debate between a Muslim
thanks,
and a
Ellen.
Christian.
I'm gonna
Okay.
move on to
Okay.
Constance, and then
Thank
we're
you.
gonna close
We
out.
have just a couple minutes left, Ellen.
Okay.
Just give me a minute.
Yeah. We do have
Okay,
two people
Constance,
running
go
for
ahead.
public office right here, so.
I know.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I would just like to, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I would just like to suggest that, one person's freedom ends, at the point where you can harm me in some way. And so if you're not vaccinated, or your child isn't vaccinated and my child is in the same school, your freedom ends at the point where your child's lack of vaccination could affect my child. It could, give my child polio or something like that. So I think freedom there's no such thing as complete freedom. Even the First Amendment has some restrictions on it. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater, right? So freedom in a society is a two-way street, frankly, I think. And we have to be aware of how our freedoms affect other people as well.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Constance. All right, guys. I know today's been a hard one. We knew it was going to be, and we have a hard stop because at 7 p.m. tonight, we have our NWSOFA orientation. So if you are new to NWSOFA, come on back to this same channel so you can get some good stuff in. Otherwise, we will see you tomorrow morning, if you can, for coffee and conversation at 9 a.m. and tomorrow at 5 p.m. for the unhappy happy hour, or the happy unhappy. You know what? I've lost track of how many happies and unhappies and what. But we will see you nevertheless at 5 p.m. On Friday. So Central Time. All those are Central Times. And y'all, I can't thank you enough for being here. We couldn't do this without each and every one of you. So thank you for another excellent soup. And it was spicy and tasty. And we will see y'all next week, 5 p.m. on